Okay, in this video, I want to look at what are some key factors, just a couple of them, and then you can use this to kind of guide your thinking as you read the rest of the chapter. So it's some key factors influencing the status of women. And I'm not going to list all, but I'm saying some key sort of economic factors. And okay, so we're looking at key factors influencing the status of women. So the first one, and these we can kind of keep in mind throughout the course. One is their status is positively influenced by the importance of their role in production. Okay, so as we look around the world and we look across human history, we can find that if women have an important role in production, their status tends to be a little bit higher than if they have no role in production. And here I'm not talking about individual women. Okay, I'm talking about as a society. Okay, so individual women, it's possible that actually high status women probably have little to no direct role in production, because in most societies, high status people actually are not very directly involved in production. What I mean though is in an overall society, if the women have more role in productive activities, then they'll have a little bit higher role and a little bit more control in that society. It does not necessarily mean that things will be, it definitely doesn't mean that things will be equal. It also definitely doesn't mean that that they'll necessarily have lots and lots of decision-making power, but it tends to give them more importance. Okay, so this and what their role historically has been influenced by the production technology. Okay, so I'll just give an example of this. So they're influenced by the production technology. Okay, so for example, the researchers have found that if we compare different societies, different agricultural societies, okay, those that their agriculture focused on using a plow, often growing things like wheat and such, these tended to be male dominated. Okay, and the thought is that while the plow is, first of all, it requires capital. They need animals to pull it, right? And also managing the plow needs significantly more upper body strength than certain other types of ag production technologies. Okay, early ag. So it needs more upper body strength, and these societies tend to be very male dominated. Okay, so historically, these societies tended to be very male dominated, and so these societies were more male dominated. And this is when this technology was invented and started to be widely used in these societies. This is also when we started to see two things which weren't seen before in, for example, hunter-gatherer societies or very simple ag. And so one of them was hiding women, right? This was societies where women were not supposed to be seen, for example, by outsiders to the family. So there started to be women being hidden away. And then the other thing that rose up in these societies was dowry. And so dowry was basically a payment on the behalf of the woman's family at the time of marriage, and this was being paid to the man's family, right? Or it was being put into resources that were being given towards the man's family. So this, again, these are indications that women's status is not very high, and we can still see this to some extent in these same societies. Okay, so this start of hiding women, where women were supposed to not be seen by outsiders. And in fact, they were also sometimes segregated from male members of their household. Again, it would be difficult to hide women in a society if they have a important productive role in activities that are occurring outdoors, right? But if their productive role in these activities is not very important, then this becomes more likely to happen. Okay, so anyways, let's move on to the next part. So the other type of ag that's kind of an early ag form would be what they might call like a shifting ag using hoes. So this is a handheld implement, right, that you use to break the ground, right, rather than this plow that's usually pulled. So in most societies that use this kind of agriculture, women play a much more active role. In fact, sometimes they play a very active role, and they might even have lots of crops that they are the ones responsible for growing, right? So they're still not equal, but they tend to have more independence and more power, and not have this situation of hiding women, not have the situation of dowry in the traditional marriage systems. So it's still not equal, but more independence. And actually, the from my own experience, uh, living in Uganda for several years and living in an agricultural community in a rural part of the country, was that again, in this agriculture system was this type of this agriculture system using hoes as the primary uh, uh, implement for farming. And there was women were heavily involved in farming. In fact, in many um, households, they might have been doing more than half of the family related of the farming related work. And this gave them, to some degree, gave them a degree of independence and a degree of power. Um, Now it was still not an equal society by any means, but this role is quite different than you might find in rural areas of northern India, for example, or some other areas that might be following a different system. So the second important factor is participation in the public sphere. So this is not, so the other one was production, but this is production outside the home. Okay, so the other one was production in general, but this is especially if it's outside the home. Productive activity outside the home. So we find this is very important, and it tends to be the more productive activity women are engaged in outside the home, the more autonomy, more independence, and higher position they have in the society. So we have more autonomy and we have higher status. Again, we're not talking about individual women. We're talking about, on average, in a society, if this is occurring, then the average woman will have more autonomy and will have higher status in that society. And so you can kind of use this when you're looking through the rest of the chapter, especially the part about the American experience before World War II, and you can kind of see this use this as a gauge for the status of women during those various periods of time. So hopefully that was helpful. We'll come back and look at it a little bit more later.